Welcome to session 17 of the Simple course. Today, in the first part of the session, we'll continue our review of the DBT Skills Training Workbook as we discuss advanced mindfulness skills. In the second part of the session, we present 4 case studies illustrating how to use all the simple tools that we've introduced so far. For those who are doing the course as part of a group, an alternative to going through the case studies is for a volunteer from the group to work with the co-leaders and practice applying the tools and skills to a situation in which they fell into a hole. To watch our 2 introductory videos entitled Attachment Style and Personality and What is Your Attachment Style, please pause this video now and open session 17 on the website itsimple2021.com. Next are our usual reminders directed mostly at people doing the course in a group. Please take a few moments to read these on your own. To watch this week's mindfulness practice video entitled Loving Kindness Meditation, please go to the website now. For people doing the YouTube course as part of a group, you can now pause for questions, comments, or feedback. Today, we will review pages 131 to 147 of the Skills Training Workbook, which explores advanced mindfulness skills. Then we'll do session 17 at the Simple Manual. At the midway point, we'll take a break. We'll also have time for a discussion. Instead of going over the case studies in our live groups, we can work with a volunteer. Please rate how well you did your homework now. To watch a video about DBT mindfulness skills, please go to the website now. Note that this is the last week of mindfulness skills. In 2 weeks, we start the emotional regulation skills module. Today, we'll explore a number of subjects. 1, doing what is effective. 2, being mindful in your daily life. 3, how to do tasks mindfully. 4, how to be mindful of your activities. 5, resistances and hindrances to mindfulness practice. 6, exploring mindfulness further. 7, mindfulness and meditation. 8, using kindness and compassion. And 9, the module conclusion. The section of the workbook that we'll review today discusses how and why to start a regular mindfulness or meditation practice and how to incorporate mindfulness into your everyday life. The section headings in the pages of the workbook that we will review are being mindful in your daily life, a mindfulness regimen, how to do tasks mindfully, how to be mindful of your mindfulness activities, resistances and hindrances to mindfulness practice, mindfulness and meditation, enhancing mindfulness with kindness and compassion, and paying attention to spaciousness and stillness. One of the main goals of this course is to help you to become more mindful. We are particularly interested in being mindful of feelings, thoughts, behaviors, and body sensations. Mindfulness requires us to be present in the moment rather than time travel to the future or the past. Mindfulness practices are ways to develop our mindfulness muscles so that we can then use those mindfulness muscles to improve our mental health. Being mindful in your daily life. We've been talking about mindfulness since the beginning of the course. The hope is that at this point, your understanding of it is impacting your life. It takes some effort to be mindful. We often overlook it. We can use cues to help us remember to practice mindfulness more often. These cues might include bracelets, sticky notes, timers, apps, or a mindfulness regimen. There are many mindfulness practices that you can incorporate into your daily life. We suggest you try different ones, perhaps using guided meditations, such as the ones we do together at the beginning of our sessions. Try to make a few minutes every day for this practice. Types of mindful practice might include 1. Mindful breathing. Count your breaths, notice sensations, catch and diffuse your thoughts. 2. Self compassion meditation. Pair mindful breathing with compassionate statements. 3. Wise mind meditation, focusing on sensations and our gut feelings. And 4. Doing everyday common tasks mindfully. Doing all the things we normally do in life while staying focused on our thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and actions in the present moment. Practice one or more of these for a few minutes every day. Pillar of Sufism, a mystical sect in Islam, is bringing mindfulness to every aspect of daily life. The workbook offers some suggestions on how you might progressively do this more. How to do everyday tasks more mindfully. Mindfulness is like a flame. Focus and shift your attention to be mindful of the present moment. Let go of distracting thoughts and judgments. Use radical acceptance to remain non-judgmental. Use wise mind to make healthy decisions. Do what's effective to accomplish your goals. Be mindful of your mindfulness activities. Mindfulness skills. 1. They help us to focus on one thing at a time in the present moment. And by doing this, we can better control and soothe our overwhelming emotions. 2. They help us learn to identify and separate judgmental thoughts from our experiences. 3. They help us to develop wise mind. To help us to build a mindfulness practice, we can use the mindfulness activities record template found in the skills workbook to record how long we spend doing each mindfulness activity. This supports us in building a consistent practice. Buddhism teaches that there are a number of common resistances and hindrances that interfere with a meditation or mindfulness practice. 5 hindrances to a mindfulness practice. 1. Desire. Refers to the wish for things to be different than they are right now. 2. Aversion. Means having anger for or ill will towards what is here and includes resistance to the present moment. Judgment is an example of aversion. 3. Sleepiness. Means feeling sleepy, heavy, and dull. Sleepiness can be a result of fatigue or an act of unconscious resistance to something scary or painful. 4. Restlessness. The opposite of sleepiness. An uncomfortable storm of thoughts, feelings, and sensations that demand movement and are distracting. 5. Doubt. An inner voice that says, I can't handle this. I don't know what to do. What good is this? This definitely is not for me. Expressed as words in your mind and a feeling of fear and resistance. How to work with the resistances and hindrances. First and foremost, you need to notice and acknowledge your hindrances without fighting them. They can become a focus of your practice and you can learn from them. Desire. Recall that no matter how many times you get what you desire, you always want more. Aversion. Recognize that anger and ill will are great teachers. Balance those feelings with compassion and kindness. Sleepiness. Know that it is a powerful condition that demands your full intention. Utilize active mindfulness and practice standing up. Splash water on your face. Restlessness. Use a narrow focus while practicing mindfulness, for example, counting breaths. Doubt. If your mind is racing, concentrate your attention in the present moment. Engage with mindfulness teachers and inspirational readings. Mindfulness and meditation. DBT's mindfulness is borrowed from the Buddhist meditation traditions. The chapter in the workbook, entitled Exploring Mindfulness Further, invites us to try additional practices adapted from traditional meditation. The objective is to help us gain a deeper appreciation for mindfulness and how to support and promote mental health. Although these practices are grounded in spiritual traditions, they do not require adherence to specific religious beliefs or carry specific cultural requirements. Mindfulness practices focusing on kindness and compassion. Various meditation practices seek to foster the five heart qualities, which are gratitude, gentleness, generosity, empathy, and loving kindness. Building a foundation of kindness and compassion helps us be non judgmental. Loving kindness meditation has been shown to promote physical and psychological healing. Loving kindness is described as a deep friendliness and welcoming, or as a quality embodying compassion and cherishing, filled with forgiveness and unconditional love. At the beginning of the session today, we did a loving kindness meditation. There are many available online. Try them. Attention to spaciousness and stillness. Sometimes struggling to be non judgmental or relaxed during meditation is a sign that we are not resting in our wholeness. Often, we over identify with an active and present smaller part or parts of ourselves. Consider the metaphor of an ocean. An ocean and its waves are not separate. Although the waves can be intense, they come and go, and they are made up of the same water as the ocean. Our wholeness is like the ocean, and the waves are the smaller parts that represent our feelings, thoughts, and stories in our mind. Sometimes we identify with the waves and lose connection to the larger ocean. It is beneficial in mindfulness to learn how to shift our focus and gain flexibility and freedom from over identifying with old habits of thinking, feeling, or behaving. In the second part of today's session, we will, using case studies, go over how to use simple tools and DBT skills. Please note that, as I previously mentioned, these are not real patients, but fictional composites of common presentations. All these examples can be found in the Simple Manual, Session 17, pages 183 to 192. Samantha, or Sam, as she liked to be called, was a 22-year-old university student who was attending the Simple course. Sam had been living with her boyfriend Steve for 6 months. Steve worked full-time as a trainer at a fitness club. Sam noticed a pattern in her relationship with Steve that she realized had been present in her previous relationships as well. Steve always wanted to do everything with her. Too much together time, however, irritated Sam, who preferred to be by herself or with other friends. This had become an issue between them, which Steve wanted to work out, but their discussions had gone nowhere and had several times ended in shouting matches that Sam had worked out on. Steve wondered if Sam wanted to be with him at all and accused her of being distant. She, in turn, saw him as needy. Because she had felt the same with her previous partners, Sam had wondered if this had something to do with her personality or attachment style. Sam had worked on a crisis plan and was walking away from fights earlier before things got out of hand. She told Steve ahead of time that this was done deliberately to avoid an escalation. Although Steve was not happy about it, the timeouts allowed both to cool down. Their fights had become less intense, but the underlying issues remained unresolved. When Sam first started doing diary cards, she used the beginner target falling into a hole, which you might recall is a generic catch all target. Sam was hoping to find a more specific intermediate target and at one of the sessions volunteered to work with a co leader on doing that. Sam looked at her diary cards for the previous 2 weeks. There were several zeros in a row, then a day in which she rated falling into a hole as 7. That was followed by 2 days that were 4s and 2 more days that were 1s. Recalling what had happened, Sam explained that after one of her afternoon classes, she had been invited by classmates to go for pizza. The small group had ended up at someone's apartment watching a movie. She knew Steve would want her to call to let him know that she would be late getting home, but determined to maintain her independence, she had defiantly decided not to do that. When Sam finally got home at 11 p.m., Steve was fuming and waiting up for her. They started falling into their usual pattern of arguing, but recalling her crisis plan, Sam immediately left the apartment and spent a couple of days at her parents'. This description of events gave her some ideas for possible intermediate targets for her Holds diary card. Conflicts with Steve was an obvious one. She wondered if there were others. Sam said that she often felt irritated and frustrated with Steve. Sometimes she also felt guilty, lonely, and sad. Replacing falling into a hole with feeling irritated with Steve made sense to Sam. Feeling irritated with her partners was a long standing hole for Sam. Sam was intrigued and wanted to explore why she became so irritated by her partners. She decided to do a chain analysis. Sam realized that when she was working on finding intermediate targets, she had already explored parts of the chain analysis. She started by reviewing the chain analysis algorithm. The topography of Sam's activation was clear from her diary card numbers, which we talked about earlier. She had also explored the event that triggered her, getting home to a fuming Steve, and the feelings she had experienced irritation and frustration at first, but later guilt, loneliness, and sadness. Having completed these columns of the chain analysis, Sam reflected on the thoughts that had accompanied her feelings. She liked her space and doing things on her own or with her friends. She could only spend so much time with Steve, particularly now that they were living together. He seemed to want to spend more time with her than she did with him. She felt suffocated and did not want to lose her independence. After the initial irritation, Sam started to feel guilty. Her thoughts were that Steve was a nice guy. He was always doing things for her and cared a lot about her. His family was close. They were kind to each other and liked spending time together. Sam's family, on the other hand, had always been critical, cold, and distant. Maybe what she felt had something to do with her upbringing and her internal working model. Maybe she had trouble loving and getting close to people. Maybe she would always feel this way and would always be lonely for the rest of her life. She noticed her sadness as she had these thoughts. When Sam got home to the apartment after her night out with friends and Steve was angry, she just wanted to leave the situation and avoid conflict. Her crisis plan provided her with a good excuse for doing that. Over the time she stayed at her parents', they had not even asked her why she had come home, just how long she planned to stay. After a couple of emotionally cool days at home, Sam longed to return to Steve, who seemed genuinely interested in her and what she did. At the same time, she was afraid that their pattern would just keep repeating. In the simple session, Sam worked on irrational mind remediation. She imagined that a friend of hers had just gone through a similar coming home late situation. The friend shared with Sam what happened and was desperate for advice. Sam thought her friend had issues with getting close to her partners and needed to work on that. She thought her friend could use feeling irritated by others as a target in her diary card. Sam suggested that rather than acting out her irritation, her friend might be mindful and curious about it. She spent some time with the sensations that came along with being irritated. One of her friend's automatic thoughts was that others were needy. An alternative thought was that she had trouble with intimacy. Around this issue, the friend should be gentle with herself, but perhaps set a goal of slowly being able to be more intimate with people. Sam thought that her friend could not be intimate because she had not learned to trust anyone, and to compensate, she had to be compulsively self sufficient. Sam wanted to offer her friend concrete suggestions that could be implemented and came up with one, start using feeling irritated with people in her diary card. Two, apply the edit, splice, and paste technique to the coming home late incident. Run the mental videos of the incident up to the point when she came home after being out with her friends. As she faced her boyfriend, started to feel suffocated and irritated by his questions, she could splice in an alternative thought. I do feel irritated, but he has a point. I could have called him to let him know that I'd be coming home late. This may be an example of my tendency to push people away when they start getting close to me. 3, practice this new video every day for a few minutes. 4, picture in her imagination telling her boyfriend what she had learned about intimacy and what she was trying to do. Eventually, when she felt ready, she could do this in real life. Having given those rational mind suggestions to her friend, Sam then took ownership of them and made them her own homework. Allison. Allison was a 42-year-old married mother of a 12-year-old son. She worked as an office manager. Allison was doing the simple course because of her long-standing issues with depression. When Allison was 5 years old, her loving mother had died in a car accident, leaving her and her 3-year-old sister in the care of their father. Allison's father, Joe, a partner in a successful accounting firm, coped with the tragedy by immersing himself in his work, while the girls were looked after by a series of nannies. On Allison's ninth birthday, Joseph announced that he was marrying their latest nanny. Ingrid, a 23-year-old Eastern European young woman, was strict and emotionally distant from the girls, but she was attractive, hardworking, and had taken on some extra household responsibilities. She not only looked after the children, but cleaned the house and was a good cook. After the wedding, Allison and her sister's relationship with Ingrid did not improve. 2 years before Allison started the course, her father had died, and Ingrid was left in charge of a sizable estate. As Ingrid's arthritis was increasingly limiting her mobility, she sponsored one of her European nieces to come work for her. The two women got along well. Often, when Allison visited, they would speak in their native language, which Allison did not understand. Allison and her sister began to worry when Ingrid, who, while Joseph was alive, had always been frugal, started spending large sums of money and making poor investment decisions. Allison thought Ingrid was being influenced by her niece and worried that what her father had spent his life saving would be squandered. Allison had suffered from depression and anxiety since she was a teenager, but her symptoms got worse following her father's death. She had decided to use depression and anxiety as her whole diary card targets. Allison's diary card revealed that her depression always seemed to hover around a 4 or 5 out of 10. Her anxiety spiked whenever she had something to do with Ingrid. She decided to do a chain analysis for one such spike. The incident was that when, as had long been their habit, Allison and her sister had come home for a visit on a Sunday afternoon, they found in the driveway a large new Cadillac SUV. Ingrid proudly announced that she had just purchased it. Allison reviewed the topography of her activation around the time of this incident. While her anxiety had been higher for at least the last year, it spiked whenever she visited Ingrid, particularly when she found yet more evidence of her financial irresponsibility. With the help of the feeling wheel, Allison identified feeling anxiety, sadness, frustration, and anger during the SUV incident. She linked the anxiety and frustration to the thought of seeing her father's estate being depleted and not knowing what to do about it. She was sad that this was how her life had turned out. After he married Ingrid, Joseph spent more and more time at work and hardly ever saw the children. The girl's relationship with Ingrid had never improved, and Allison had coped by being compliant and keeping her feelings and thoughts to herself. She was frustrated and angry that Ingrid's niece seemed to be manipulating her. Whenever Allison had approached Ingrid about this, she would dismiss it and tell her that she worried too much. Just as she had always done, Allison internalized her behavior, ruminated, and lost sleep. She had withdrawn from some of her usual activities and was irritable and curt with people around her. Allison imagined that the same situation had happened to a friend who had well regulated emotions. Marjorie, whom she had known since high school, was kind but assertive. What would Marjorie do in this situation? Marjorie would not be intimidated. This was an unfair situation, and it was reasonable to address it rather than put up with it. Marjorie would not keep her feelings and thoughts to herself. She would, in a kind but assertive way, explain to her stepmother what she felt, thought, and wanted to see happen. The stepmother was entitled to spend her father's money, but not to throw it away foolishly. If this conversation went nowhere, Marjorie would find out what her legal rights were. If she did not have a legal recourse, try to maintain a cordial relationship with her stepmother and negotiate. If she exhausted her options, she would simply walk away. It would be sad, but she did not want to waste her life feeling resentment and anger. Marjorie, like Allison, was financially comfortable. Inheriting some of her father's large estate would be nice, but it would not be a life changer. After imagining what Marjorie would do, Allison considered how she could apply it to herself and decided on an action plan. One, she would use the mental video of the visit when she found the SUV in the driveway. She would then splice and edit out the part in which she kept her feelings and thoughts to herself while stewing on them. She had done this all her life. Instead, she would paste in an assertive conversation in which she explained to Ingrid how she felt, her thoughts, and what she planned to do. Imagining this conversation activated Allison, and she knew she had to practice it in her imagination for some time before she could do it in person. While she practiced, she reminded herself to stay in the window of tolerance by pendulating. 2. In her imagination, Allison practiced this conversation, not expecting to have a real conversation with Ingrid anytime soon. She felt this took some of the pressure off. 3. Allison knew a family lawyer who she trusted and decided she would talk to him to review her legal options. 4. She felt that if trying to work things out did not produce results, she would not be held hostage by the potential inheritance and she would distance herself from Ingrid. Allison realized that her feelings, thoughts, and behaviors in the present day situation were similar to those she had had as a little girl. Her wise mind and adult self needed to step up and protect her inner frightened child. George. George was a retired factory worker whose grown children had long ago moved away. George and Doris had been married for 40 years. It was a committed but unhappy relationship, as Doris was constantly criticizing George. The most recent dispute was over his sleeping habits. George liked to stay up until 3 a.m. and did not get up until noon. Doris complained that because of this, she had to be quiet in the mornings and could not have her friends over. Doris punished George by being extra loud in the mornings, slamming doors and cupboards as she did her housework. She would also stonewall him. George tried to ignore her and spend most of his day in the garage, which he had converted to a workshop, tinkering with various projects. George used isolation, anxiety, and conflicts with Doris as his hole's diary card targets. George decided to do a chain analysis focusing on a recent incident. He had just gotten up from bed and was having breakfast. It was 11 a.m. Doris walked into the kitchen, grabbed something, and left, slamming the door so hard that the sleeping cat instantly jumped into the air and looked terrified. George, too, felt terrified, but could not put thoughts to that feeling. He did, however, have a flashback to when he was a child and he had felt terrified by his father's angry outbursts. George hurriedly prepared his breakfast and took it out to the workshop, where he knew he would be safe. He soothed himself with his woodwork. He knew Doris would cool down and her hot anger would turn to more bearable cold anger, which he had learned to live with. He felt sad that this was his life. George imagined that a situation like his, involving a critical wife and sleep habits, had happened to a friend, John. Not knowing what to do, John had come to George for advice. George thought that John's wife was bad tempered and mean to him. John should either stand up to her or leave her. He had worked all his life to support his family, and now he was retired. He deserved some peace. She had no right to treat him this way. George did not blame John for sleeping until noon. It was his way of avoiding his mean wife. George wondered why John, who like him was 6'2" and weighed 250 pounds, was afraid of his 5'1", 105-pound wife. That was clearly not rational, but John had been afraid of angry people all his life. It started in his childhood. George suggested that John consider the following. 1. In his imagination, practice telling his wife how he felt, what he thought, and what he wanted, for her to be at least civil. 2. George thought that John's wife might be even angrier if he told her this. He had to reassure himself that there was no way she could physically harm him. 3. If that did not work, John should seriously consider separating from his wife. He would take a financial hit, but he would survive. He might be lonely, but he was lonely now. He should not have to live in permanent fear for the rest of his life. Advising John about what to do was easy, but George could not imagine doing these things himself. Just thinking about them frightened him. George decided that, for the time being, he would only practice this in his imagination. When his fear was activated, he would pendulate to thoughts that he was safe to stay in the window of tolerance. George would replace the usual video in which he was intimidated by his wife and remained passive with ones in which he was calmly assertive. He had to practice this in his imagination for a long while before he would contemplate doing it in real life. Kelly. Kelly was a 42-year-old married mother of three young children. She had worked in a bank, but 3 years ago had left her job to spend more time at home. Her eldest son, 13-year-old Scott, had been diagnosed with ADHD and a learning disorder. Scott was bright but impulsive, disorganized and undisciplined, even for a boy his age. Scott could do well at school but required constant structure and supervision. Providing this for Scott was exhausting, especially because Kelly's husband, who ran his own business, spent 70 hours a week at work. Kelly checked Scott's homework every day. She arranged with his teachers that they would email her the homework Scott was supposed to do, and she would use a behavioral program giving him a token reward for completing it. He could use these tokens to buy privileges. For his health class, Scott had been asked to list what he liked and did not like about his life, why he did or did not like these things, and how he thought he could change them. Kelly was intrigued when she heard about the homework from his teacher, and rather than just giving it a cursory glance to make sure it was done, she read all of it. Kelly was extremely upset by what Scott wrote. He did not like her because she was too strict and would not let him do the things that he enjoyed. Kelly had grown up in a home with parents who were constantly bickering and ignored her and her older brother. From the time she was a teenager, Kelly suffered from chronic low grade depression, punctuated by episodes of more severe symptoms, during which she struggled to function. Her diary card targets were feeling hurt and rejected, feeling despair, and anger and frustration. Following the incident with Scott's homework, her numbers across all the targets had been much higher. Kelly remarked that as she read Scott's essay, she started feeling hurt and sad. It was a very steep downhill. She had remained down and was now, after 4 days, just beginning to recover. She had felt hurt, rejected, sad, angry, frustrated, and in despair. Kelly ruminated on how much she loved Scott, wanted the best for him, and had gone to great lengths to find a way to help him be more responsible. She put tremendous effort into this, and he hated her for it. Scott had also written that he much preferred his father, who was seldom home, but did take him fishing, hunting, snowmobiling, and dirt biking when he was. Kelly thought she was a terrible mother. Nobody had ever liked her, not even her parents. She wondered what was wrong with her. Did she not do all she could to please people and get their approval? She had worked hard with the school and with a psychologist to come up with this plan for Scott, and they had emphasized how critical it was for his future. She wanted to give up and run away. She wanted to go to bed and never get up. She checked those urges, but it took all of her energy to keep attending to her daily chores and routines. She was present in her body, but not in her spirit. Kelly was close to a cousin, Sally, with whom she frequently spoke on the phone. Sally had a 9-year-old son who had been diagnosed with ADHD and was also a handful. Sally was emotionally well regulated and assertive. Kelly decided to imagine Sally in her situation. Sally would say that being a parent was a hard job. Sometimes the right thing to do is the hard thing, and it's not popular. Kids often want to do the easy thing. That is not always good for them in the long term. The parent's role is to help them do the hard thing that is the right thing. Besides, what kid had not at some point hated their parents? As Kelly worked through this and imagined what Sally would feel, think, and do, her demeanor changed. She straightened up, sounded more self assured, and even began to smile. Kelly would use Sally's thoughts and paste them onto her video from the homework incident. In her imagination, she would go over the new edited video every night for the next week. In the PowerPoint presentation that you will find on the website, there's a review and practice component that covers the tools, techniques, and strategies that we have previously covered in this simple course. Looking over those slides will help you consolidate the material. Let's look at the homework for this session. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and see you next session.